I had to be shamed in front of everyone I knew. I had to run headfirst into my own death just to finally learn what it meant to be alive. This isn't just a story I'm telling you. This is proof that even when you're buried in the deepest, darkest hole you can imagine, there's a light waiting to pull you out. It all started at a dead-end job. I was flipping burgers at a cheap fast food joint off the highway. From the outside, I was just another guy in a grease-stained apron, forcing a smile. But on the inside, I was fighting a war nobody could see. Every time I said, "Have a nice day," the words felt like a lead weight in my mouth. It was a mask I wore, and it was getting heavier every single day. That afternoon, I dropped a box of supplies. Soda, syrup, and paper cups went everywhere. It was a simple mistake, but to my manager, it was the end of the world. He was a big guy, and his face turned a blotchy, angry red. He stomped over, jabbing a thick finger in my face. His voice boomed through the entire restaurant. "Are you stupid?" he screamed. "Look at this mess. You're costing me money. Can't you do anything right? You're worthless." Time just stopped. The beeping from the fryers, the chatter of customers, it all faded into a low, buzzing hum in my ears. I could feel every eye in the place on me. Some looked down at their food, embarrassed for me. Others just stared, a mix of pity and morbid curiosity on their faces. Every word he spit at me was another nail being hammered into my coffin. I couldn't breathe. The air was thick with shame. And right there, standing in a puddle of sticky soda, in front of all those strangers, the darkness I'd been fighting for so long finally won. It just swallowed me whole. Before that day, my life was a flat line, a constant gray hum. I lived in a shoebox apartment on the third floor of a walk-up that always smelled like stale cigarette smoke and boiled cabbage. My one window looked out at a brick wall. That was my view of the world. A red brick wall. It felt fitting. My routine was my prison. Wake up when it was still dark. The same instant coffee that tasted like dirt. The same bus ride where I'd stare out the window watching people who actually looked alive. They were heading to real jobs, to families, to lives that mattered. I was just heading to the fryer. I was a ghost in a grease-stained uniform, and nobody even knew my name. They just knew me as the guy who took their order. I had a family once, or, well, I still did, but I'd push them away. My mom would call, her voice always full of a hopeful worry I couldn't stand. I'd let it go to voicemail every time. What could I possibly say? That her son, the one she had all these dreams for, was a professional failure whose biggest accomplishment of the day was not burning the fries. It was easier to just be a disappointment in silence. The worst part was the quiet. After my shift, I'd come home to that empty room. The silence was so loud it screamed. It would tell me all the things my manager eventually did. "You're worthless. You're a waste of space. You've done nothing with your life." I'd turn on the TV just to drown out the voice in my own head. I was surrounded by millions of people in this city, but I had never felt more alone. I was invisible, a shadow walking among the living. But the thing nobody knew, the secret I kept locked down tight, was that I didn't always feel this way. I used to have dreams. I used to play guitar. I used to believe I could be somebody, but somewhere along the line that person got lost. He just faded away little by little until all that was left was this empty shell. The manager didn't break me that day. He just pointed out that I was already broken. What happened next, though, it wasn't just about me anymore. It was about something so much bigger. Looking back, the signs were all there. They weren't like flashing red lights or warning sirens. They were quieter, little cracks in the foundation of my reality. The week leading up to that day, the world started to feel thin, like a movie set where I could see the cardboard edges if I looked too hard. I'd be on the bus, and for a second, the faces of the other passengers would look like blank, featureless masks. I'd blink, and they'd be normal again. I told myself I was just tired, but I knew deep down it was something else. I was coming untethered from the world. There was this one moment, maybe 2 days before it all happened. A little girl, no older than 5, came up to the counter with her mom. She handed me a crumpled dollar for a small cone and looked me right in the eye. She had these big, serious blue eyes. She said, "You look sad." Just like that. Her mom quickly shushed her, embarrassed, but the words just hung in the air between us. It wasn't an accusation. It was just a fact. And for the first time in years, I felt seen. It was so overwhelming, so painful that I almost couldn't breathe. I just forced a smile and handed her the ice cream. I didn't say a word. I should have said thank you. The night before, my phone buzzed. It was my mom. I watched her name glow on the dark screen of my room. I had this sudden, powerful urge to answer it. A voice inside me, a voice I hadn't heard in a long time, was screaming, "Pick it up, just pick it up." But I couldn't. The shame was like a physical weight pinning my hand down. I let it go to voicemail, just like all the others. But this time felt different. It felt final. I didn't know then that her message was a desperate plea, that she'd had a nightmare about me and was begging me to just call her back to say I was okay. I wouldn't hear that message until much, much later. That last morning, I woke up feeling strangely calm. The screaming in my head had stopped. It was replaced by a quiet, empty hum. It was the kind of calm that comes after a long battle when you've finally surrendered. I didn't taste the coffee. I didn't feel the cold air on my walk to the bus stop. I was a ghost already, just going through the motions. I remember looking at my reflection in the bus window as we drove into the city. I didn't see myself. I saw a stranger with hollow eyes and a face I didn't recognize, and I didn't even care. But what happened when I walked through those glass doors at work? That's when the quiet hum turned into a roar. I didn't know I was walking toward my own end. Or maybe a part of me did. Maybe that's what I wanted all along. I didn't say a word. I didn't even look at him. I just turned, my feet sloshing in the sticky mess on the floor. I walked to the break room, untied the strings of my apron, the one that smelled permanently of grease and regret, and threw it on the floor. I could hear my manager start to yell again, something about me walking away from him, but his voice was already a million miles away. I pushed open the glass door and stepped out into the blinding afternoon sun, and then I just ran. I didn't have a destination. I was just running from the shame, from the smell of the fryer, from the ghost in the mirror. My lungs burned and my legs screamed, but I didn't stop. The city became a blur of colors and noise. Car horns blared, people shouted, but it was all just static. The only thing I could hear was that one word, repeating over and over in my head, a frantic, desperate drumbeat. Worthless. Worthless. I just wanted it to stop. I just wanted the noise to finally go away. I burst out onto a main street, a river of roaring traffic. I didn't even slow down. I reached the curb, my chest heaving, tears streaming down my face and mixing with the sweat. And that's when I saw it. A pair of headlights, bright and yellow like two angry eyes, coming right at me, fast. In that split second, everything went quiet. The voice in my head finally shut up. And a new thought, a calm and clear thought, surfaced through the chaos. Here it is. This is how it stops. It wasn't a thought of fear. It was a thought of relief. I didn't step back. I didn't even flinch. I just looked right into the light. I remember the screech of tires on pavement, a sound that seemed to rip the air in half. There was a sudden violent jolt, a force so immense it felt like the whole world had crashed into me. It wasn't pain, not at first. It was just pressure, a blinding white flash. And in that last fractured moment of consciousness, a single image filled my mind. My mom's name glowing on my phone screen. Her last call. The one I never answered. Then nothing. The pressure vanished. The light went out. The screaming of the tires faded into a deep, profound silence. It was the most complete and total silence I had ever known. I felt a strange sensation, like I was floating, weightless, in a warm, dark ocean. There was no body, no pain, no memory of the burger joint or the brick wall outside my window. There was only me. And for the first time in a very, very long time, I was at peace. I was gone. But what happened next, that wasn't the end. It was the true beginning. What do you think happens when everything we know just stops? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon. I have so many more stories like this to share. Stories that prove we are so much more than what we see in the mirror. But that silence, it didn't last. It was more like the world was holding its breath. And then it exhaled. Slowly, I felt a gentle pull. It wasn't physical. It was like a string tied to my very center was being tugged upward, lifting me out of the darkness. I felt weightless, like a piece of dust floating on a sunbeam. The crushing pressure was gone. The pain was gone. In fact, every feeling I'd ever associated with having a body was just gone. I opened my eyes, except I didn't have eyes. I didn't have a face or hands or feet. I was just awareness, pure consciousness, and I was floating. I drifted up through the roof of a car, through the air itself, which felt thick and warm like water. Below me, I saw a scene of chaos. Red and blue lights were flashing, painting the street in frantic strokes of color. A small crowd had gathered, and in the center of it all, lying on the wet asphalt next to a car with a shattered windshield, was a body. It was broken and still. It was my body. That should have been terrifying. Seeing myself like that, a discarded puppet with its strings cut. But it wasn't. All the shame, the anger, the worthlessness that had lived inside that body, it was still down there with it. Up here where I was, there was only a profound sense of peace. A quiet curiosity. I watched as paramedics worked frantically, their voices muffled and distant, like I was listening to them through a wall. Saw their lips move. I saw the urgency in their faces, but I couldn't feel any of it. It was like watching a movie about someone else. A sad movie, but one I already knew the ending to. And then I turned away from the scene. Or rather, my awareness shifted. The chaotic flashing lights of the street began to fade, replaced by a soft golden glow that seemed to come from everywhere at once. It wasn't a light you see with your eyes. It was a light you feel with your soul. It was warm, it was alive, and it was pulling me closer. The last echoes of the sirens and the city noise dissolved into a gentle hum, like a perfect musical chord that resonated with the very essence of who I was. I knew, without knowing how I knew, that I was no longer between worlds. I was going home. But I wasn't going alone. I could feel a presence within that light, something ancient and powerful, and made of a love so absolute it made every good feeling I'd ever had on earth feel like a pale shadow. I was a drop of water returning to the ocean, and I wasn't afraid. For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid at all. What do you think was waiting for me inside that light? Don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell icon, because what this presence showed me next changed not only my life, but my entire understanding of why we're even here. You won't want to miss it. As I drifted into that golden light, the world I knew just dissolved. It wasn't a place you could see with your eyes. It was a place you felt with your entire being. Imagine the feeling of the warmest sun on your skin, the joy of the deepest laugh you've ever had, and the comfort of the safest hug you've ever known, all happening at once, 1,000,000 times over. That was the air here. It was made of pure, unconditional love. There were no colors, because it was all colors. There was no sound, because it was the most beautiful music ever composed, and in the center of it all, I felt a presence. It wasn't a man with a beard on a throne. It was everything. The source of the intelligence that dreamed up the stars and knew my name before I was ever born. I didn't see it. I was part of it. I was a single thought inside an infinite mind. And all the pain and fear I'd carried my whole life, the shame from the restaurant, the loneliness of my apartment, it all felt so small, so insignificant. Like a single grain of sand on an endless beach. Without a voice, my soul cried out the only thing it could. Lord, save me. The response wasn't in words. It was a wave of pure empathy that washed over me. There was no judgment for giving up. No anger for throwing my life away. There was only a profound, heartbreaking understanding. And then he showed me my life, but not through my eyes. I was forced to feel it through the eyes of everyone I had ever met. I felt the deep, aching worry in my mother's heart every single time she called and I sent her a voicemail. I felt her sleepless nights, the silent tears she cried, praying for a son who had shut her out completely. It was a pain so immense it would have shattered me on earth. But then came the first true revelation. I felt the brief, innocent flash of concern from the little girl at the counter. I even felt the life of my manager. I saw his own private hell, the pressure from his bosses, the family he was struggling to feed, the self-hatred he felt that he took out on me. I saw that his cruelty wasn't about me at all. It was a reflection of his own brokenness. We were two drowning men, and he had just pushed me under to keep his own head above water for a few more seconds. Then the perspective pulled back, and the presence showed me something that changed everything. It showed me my path. Every moment of pain, every failure, every tear wasn't a punishment. It was a curriculum. It was a series of carefully placed signposts designed to get me to this exact moment. The humiliation wasn't meant to destroy me. It was meant to break the shell I had built around myself so that finally something new could be born. My purpose wasn't to flip burgers. My purpose was to fall, to break, to die, and to learn that his love was strong enough to catch me. That was the second revelation. My greatest shame was actually my greatest gift. Finally, I felt a sort of boundary. It wasn't a wall or a gate. It was more like the shore of an ocean. On one side was this eternal peace, this perfect love. I could step across and all the struggle would be over forever. I could just merge with the light. On the other side was the world. The pain, the struggle, the cold apartment, the long bus rides. He gave me the choice. No pressure, no command. Just a simple, loving choice. Stay or go back. The third and final revelation wasn't something he showed me. It was something I realized myself. The purpose of life wasn't to escape the pain. It was to find him in the middle of it and bring that light back for others to see. If you were standing on that shore with paradise in front of you and all your pain behind you, what choice would you have made? Be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because the story of what happened when I came back and how I faced my old manager is something you have to hear to believe. I stood there on the edge of eternity, looking back at the world. The pain, the loneliness, the grease-stained apron, it was all waiting for me. And right in front of me, an ocean of perfect golden peace, an end to all struggle. All I had to do was take one more step, and I would dissolve into that love forever. A voice, the part of me that was still the broken man from the restaurant, screamed, "Stay. Why would you ever go back? You have nothing there. And for a second it was right. I had nothing. But that wasn't true anymore. I had this truth. I thought of my mom, her worried face, the voicemails I never listened to. I thought of the little girl with the sad eyes. I even thought of my manager drowning in his own private hell. They couldn't see this light. They were still trapped in the gray, just like I had been. Leaving them behind felt selfish. It felt like finding the cure for a disease and then just keeping it for yourself. The choice wasn't between my pain and my peace. It was between my comfort and their hope. I turned away from the golden ocean. I faced the tiny, distant point of light that was my life, my world, and with all the strength of my soul, I made my choice. I'm going back. The moment I decided, the presence enveloped me one last time. There was no grand speech, no list of commandments, just a final, powerful thought that was imprinted onto my very being. It was a message of pure clarity. The love you felt here is not a reward for the end of the journey. It is the fuel for the beginning of it. Go, show them what is real. And with that I felt a violent pull, like a fish being yanked out of the water on a line. The peace was ripped away from me. The journey back was pure agony. It felt like being forced through a pinhole. My infinite, weightless awareness was being compressed back into a tiny, claustrophobic box of flesh and bone. The beautiful music of eternity warped into a dull, terrifying roar. I felt gravity first, a crushing weight that slammed down on me, pinning me to something hard and cold. Then came the pain. It wasn't one pain. It was a symphony of it. A shattered leg, broken ribs, a fire in my skull. Every nerve ending in my body screamed at once. The first sound I heard was a rhythmic, artificial beep. Steady. Annoying. The most beautiful sound I had ever heard. It meant I was alive. I smelled something sterile, like rubbing alcohol. A smell that cut through the fog in my head. I forced my eyelids open. They felt like they were made of lead. Above me I saw a white ceiling tile with a small water stain in the corner. I was looking at it through my own two eyes. I was back. I was really back. And as I lay there, trapped in a broken body, unable to move, a single tear rolled down my cheek and onto the stiff hospital pillow. It wasn't a tear of pain or sadness. It was a tear of gratitude. Because I knew the man who ran into that street was gone forever. Someone new had just been born. If you were given that second chance, would you have the courage to forgive the person who pushed you to the edge? Don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell icon. Because what happened when I came face to face with my old manager again is a story of forgiveness that you have to see to believe. You won't want to miss it. The first person I saw when the world came back into focus was a doctor. She had tired lines around her eyes, but her voice was gentle. She explained what had happened in a calm, clinical way: cardiac arrest on impact, multiple fractures. She said I was unresponsive for nearly 15 minutes. She used the word miracle more than once, shaking her head slightly as she looked at my chart. I just nodded. I wanted to tell her it wasn't a miracle, it was a choice. I wanted to tell her where I'd been, what I'd seen, but how could I? She saw a patient who got lucky. I knew I was a messenger who'd been sent back. But the real impact, the thing that truly grounded me back in this world, was when the door to my room creaked open a few hours later. It was my mom. Her face was a wreck. It was pale and puffy, etched with the kind of fear only a parent can know. The moment she saw my eyes were open, a sound escaped her lips. It wasn't a cry. It was more like the air being let out of her soul after holding her breath for days. She rushed to my bedside, her hands trembling as she reached for mine, afraid to touch me as if I might break. All those years I'd seen her love as a weight, a reminder of my failures. But now, looking at her, I felt it for what it was. The purest, most powerful force on earth. I couldn't speak past the tube in my throat, but I squeezed her hand. For the first time, I wasn't pushing her away. I was holding on for dear life. The days that followed were a special kind of hell. The peace I'd felt was an unshakable foundation inside me, but the house built on top of it, my body was in ruins. Every movement was a fresh wave of agony. Learning to use my legs again was a slow, humiliating process, shuffling a few feet down a sterile hallway with a walker while my muscles screamed. The old voice of worthlessness tried to come back in those quiet moments. It would whisper, "See, you're still broken, you're still weak." But it was different now. The voice was just an echo in an empty room. Down in the silence, beneath the pain, was the memory of that golden light. And it was louder. The change wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. I started noticing small things. The way the sunlight would catch the water in the plastic cup by my bed. The exhausted kindness in the eyes of the night nurse. The world outside my window wasn't just a brick wall anymore. It was a sky that changed colors. A tree with leaves that danced in the wind. I was seeing it all for the first time. The biggest secret I kept from the doctors and nurses wasn't where I'd been, but the fact that I was grateful for the pain. It was a constant screaming reminder that I was alive, that I had been given another chance. A week into my recovery, a nurse brought me a plastic bag with my personal effects. My wallet, my keys, and my phone. Its screen a spiderweb of cracks. I plugged it in, and to my surprise, it lit up. One notification stood out. A voicemail from my mom, received the night before the accident. My heart hammered against my broken ribs. I finally listened to it. Her voice was thick with panic, telling me she'd had a terrible nightmare about me, begging me to just call her back, to let her know I was safe. Hearing her desperate plea from the past, knowing I was lying there in that bed because I had ignored it, it was a pain sharper than any broken bone. It was the last piece of the old me that needed to break, and in its place, a new resolve settled in my soul. I wasn't just going to live, I was going to make it count. If you had the chance to hear a message from your past, a warning you ignored, would you let it destroy you with guilt? Or would you use it to build a better future? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon. The story of how I walked out of that hospital and began to truly live is coming next. And it's proof that your past doesn't have to define your future. Walking out of that hospital was like being born for a second time. The automatic doors slid open with a soft whoosh, and the city air hit me. It wasn't just air. I could feel the humidity on my skin. I could smell the exhaust from a passing bus mixed with the scent of roasted nuts from a street vendor. The world wasn't gray anymore. It was an explosion of color. The yellow of the taxis was so bright it almost hurt my eyes. The sky wasn't just blue. It was 100 different shades of blue, layered and deep. Before, it was all just background noise. Now it was a symphony, and every car horn and distant siren was a note in the music. I took a step onto the pavement, leaning heavily on a cane, and just stood there, letting it all wash over me. I was a man who had only ever seen in black and white, suddenly dropped into a world of vibrant technicolor. My mom drove me home. For the first time, the silence in the car wasn't awkward or heavy with things unsaid. It was comfortable. I looked over at her, really looked at her, not as the source of my guilt, but as a person. I saw the silver threads in her hair, the faint lines of worry around her mouth that were finally starting to soften. I reached over and put my hand on hers. She flinched, surprised, then her fingers wrapped around mine, holding on tight. "I'm okay, Mom," I said, and my voice didn't sound like it belonged to a ghost anymore. "I'm really okay." A single tear rolled down her cheek, but this time I knew it wasn't a tear of sadness, it was a tear of relief. In that moment, our relationship was rebuilt. The wall I had spent years constructing between us crumbled into dust. Walking back into my old apartment should have been depressing. The same smell of stale smoke and boiled cabbage hung in the hallway. The same dim light filtered through the one window. But when I looked out that window, I didn't see a prison. I saw a red brick wall, and I noticed for the very first time the way the moss grew in the cracks between the bricks. I saw the beauty in its imperfection. This room wasn't my cage anymore. It was my cocoon. It was the place the old me had to die so the new me could be born. I didn't feel the need to run from it. Instead, I felt a strange sense of gratitude. This was ground zero. This was where the real work would begin. My new purpose didn't arrive like a lightning bolt. It was quieter, a slow dawn breaking inside me. I realized the message from the light wasn't for me to build a church or write a book. It was simpler. It was to do for others what that little girl in the restaurant did for me, to just see them. I thought about all the other ghosts walking around, just like I had been. The tired cashier, the invisible janitor, the lonely person on the bus. My mission was to look them in the eye and acknowledge their existence, to share a sliver of the light I had been shown. It wasn't about saving the world. It was about saving one person's moment, one person's day, just by letting them know they weren't invisible. The next day, I took the bus. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I sat near the front and watched the driver. He had a weary look on his face, the same one I used to see in the mirror. When I got to my stop, I walked up to him. He was expecting me to just walk off like everyone else. I looked him in the eye and said, "Thank you. I appreciate you getting us all here safely." He was so stunned he just blinked for a second. Then a small, genuine smile spread across his face. "You have a good day," he said, and his voice was a little warmer. It was a tiny thing, a nothing moment, but it felt like everything. I felt the light inside me get just a little bit brighter. I finally understood. The love I felt over there wasn't meant to be hoarded. It was meant to be given away, piece by piece. But I knew there was still one piece of my old life I had to face. One person I needed to see. My healing wouldn't be complete until I could look into the eyes of the man whose cruelty had been the catalyst for my death. I had to go back to the restaurant. Not for revenge. Not for an apology. But for something so much more important. Have you ever had a moment, no matter how small, that completely changed the way you see the world? Make sure you're subscribed and have that notification bell on, because you're going to want to see what happened when I finally came face to face with my old manager. It wasn't what either of us expected. Walking back to that restaurant felt like walking onto the set of a movie about someone else's life. The smell of grease still hung in the air. The same faded posters were taped to the windows. But this time I wasn't a ghost. My cane tapped a steady rhythm on the pavement, a reminder of the journey I'd taken. I wasn't there with a heart full of anger or a need for revenge. I was there with a strange, quiet peace. I pushed open the glass door, the little bell above it chiming, and stepped back into the place where my old life had ended. He was there, standing behind the counter, yelling at some new kid who looked just as terrified as I used to be. But when he saw me, the words died in his throat. His face, which I remembered as a mask of blotchy rage, just collapsed. He looked smaller, older. The anger was gone, replaced by a deep, hollow shame. He mumbled something to the new employee and walked slowly toward me, wiping his sweaty hands on his apron. He stopped a few feet away, unable to meet my eyes. "Kid," he started, his voice a rough whisper. I heard what happened. I haven't had a peaceful night's sleep since that day. Every time I close my eyes, I see your face." His own eyes started to well up. "I am so sorry. What I did, it was unforgivable." I looked at this broken man and I didn't see a monster. I saw a reflection of what I used to be. Someone drowning in their own pain, thrashing around and pulling others down with them. The presence hadn't shown me judgment. It had shown me understanding. And that was the final gift I had to give. Took a step closer and put my hand on his shoulder. He flinched, expecting me to hit him. "I forgive you," I said, and the words weren't just sounds. They were a release. I felt the last heavy chain of my past snap. "With all my heart, I forgive you." He finally looked up, tears streaming down his face, and in his eyes I saw a flicker of the same light I had been shown. In that moment, we weren't a manager and his worthless employee. We were just two broken people, finding a little bit of grace in the ruins. That's what I came back to understand. The light I saw, that incredible, unconditional love, it isn't waiting for us at the end of the line. It's right here, right now. It's hidden in the most difficult moments. It's in the courage to face your past, the strength to forgive someone who hurt you, and the grace to forgive yourself. The purpose of life wasn't to escape the pain. It was to find the love inside of it, and then give it away. The humiliation, the accident, the pain, it wasn't my end. It was a violent, painful, and beautiful birth. It was the beginning of my path back to life. If you're out there right now, standing in your own puddle of spilled soda, feeling the weight of every eye on you, hearing that voice telling you that you're worthless, please hear me. That is not the end of your story. Your rock bottom is not a grave. It's a foundation. Quote, "There is a love so powerful, a light so bright, that it can find you in the deepest, darkest hole you can imagine. It's waiting for you. All you have to do is be willing to see it." So let me ask you this. What would you do if you knew without a doubt that your greatest pain was actually the beginning of your greatest purpose? If this story touched you, please subscribe and turn on notifications by hitting the bell. I have so many more stories to share, stories that prove we are all so much more than our darkest moments. You won't want to miss them.